Love music, love life, love smooth. Yes, this is Smooth 98.1, where we love music and we love life. Most definitely, it's a Thursday morning, 11th day of September 2025. It's 31 minutes past 7 a.m. and it's that time to get into the world of the major stories, the headlines, the big ones. This is Freshly Pressed. My name is Ayokunmi, and welcome to another beautiful Thursday. And we look forward to an interesting morning which you will make more interesting with your thoughts and contributions, which you can always share with us on WhatsApp and on YouTube as well. Now, the WhatsApp number is 0911 999 0981 0911 You can send your messages there as per the usual. Hey, we always love to hear from you. YouTube, you can find us streaming live at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. You can leave your comments in the chat box there as per the usual, and we'll kick things along as we always do. All right, joining me to take a look at the stories, analyze, and of course, give perspective on the major issues. Mr. C and Gbubemi are with me this morning. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Gbubemi, how you doing? Good morning.
I'm good. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Mr. C. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, Mr. C, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Lagos.
Mm. All right, let's begin our journey this morning. Let's see here. Where do we begin? Let's start with the former NNPCL boss, Kyari. We're taking this from The Punch. The immediate past group managing director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. Now, he's currently being interrogated by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission over alleged financial misconduct during his tenure. Um, Sources within the anti-graft agency who spoke on the condition of anonymity confirmed to Punch correspondents that Kyari was at the EFCC headquarters out there in Abuja. Mr. C, we've talked about Kyari at different times after leaving office and asking the question as to if he will answer questions about his tenure, so many different issues, talking about funds here and there, talking about refineries, postponements, and the monies also that were involved in the turnaround maintenance at different points in time. And a question that burns on the mind is this invitation and this line of questioning going to lead to anything tangible at the end of the day?
Question. So mainly Kyari, can
We can. It's going in and out, kind of doing that echo thingy that it does.
right. Okay, one sec.
Sometimes technology does this. Okay, you know what, Mr. C, while you try to figure that out, I will switch over to Gbubemi real quick and then we'll come back to you. Luckily, you just started to get your thoughts in on that one. I'll come back to you, Mr. C. Gbubemi, let's talk about this story coming out of the Guardian here, and this is about marine and blue economy. Now, the story says that weak implementation of policies, poor enforcement of maritime laws, underutilization of related industries like steel and revenue leakages have continued to cost Nigeria the $20 billion yearly projected revenue generation from the blue economy sector. Now, this was disclosed yesterday in the Sea Empowerment and Research Center policy brief for national economic renewal titled Blue Economy Broken Promises, where are Nigeria's maritime billions? Now, just looking at the fact that there's so much money being left on the table. Now, this is one ministry that hardly ever gets mentioned. We hardly ever talk about it. In fact, before we came on, you were even asking the question as to is that ministry actually still open? Now, the minister there, Adegboyega Oyetola, even though he's been trying to put a couple of things in place in terms of maritime security, port infrastructure, and so on and so forth, there's still so much to actually be done. Like I said, so much money being left on the table. $20 billion yearly projected revenue from that sector. Nothing to show for it. I mean, why does this economy not get as much heat as the other sorry, this ministry, I beg your pardon, get as much heat as all the other ministries usually do?
Like you rightly mentioned, friend and I had discussed that does the ministry still exist? And to be honest, I have the same sentiments because we haven't heard anything. Well, so I stand to be corrected. We haven't heard anything, about what the minister has been doing, all the while. According to this report, NIMASA had projected that the ministry should be able, the sector rather, should be able to generate at least $20 billion, and a significant amount of that has been lost due to, you know, issues like poor enforcement of maritime laws, underutilization of related industries, weak implementation of policies. But I'd like to focus on poor enforcement of maritime laws. Now, one of the key things that I've realized is that when you don't enforce laws in whatever sector it is, people will just have their way, and it begs me to always wonder why exactly this laxity, should I say, has been adopted, in terms of addressing things, for example, like piracy, smuggling, all of those leakages can be easily tapped. So for me, those are like the low-hanging fruits, things that you can easily address without having to try and do something groundbreaking, for example. A lot of these things are things that can be easily tackled before you start trying to do something great, quote and unquote. So for me, I wonder as well, when the minister got into office, what was his plan? What blueprint did he have? What were the areas that he decided to focus on, to be able to bring about a turnaround? The minister, the president has an officer who is in charge of assessing ministers' performances. What were the agreed KPIs as to what the kind of results that the minister was supposed to focus on and to generate. Those are the sort of things that I would also like to hear. President Tinubu's renewed hope agenda, is supposedly focused on, trying to improve the economy in various ways. Lately, there's been a lot of focus on increasing revenue, non-oil revenue, and this is such an easy source for non-oil revenue.
As you said, low-hanging fruit.
Exactly. The potentials are so high. We have over 800 kilometers of coastline in the country. We have so many ports. We are strategically placed within West Africa to be able to serve the whole of Africa, but we're not getting those results. Now, if these issues are not tackled, clearly those resources, those income are falling into other people's pockets.
Most definitely.
And I always say these things, it's not hard to trace. It's not like you're looking for a pin. You know where to start, you know how to progress. You can find these people, you can hold them accountable. So those leakages, those issues of corruption, those are things that should easily be tackled. The maritime laws are there. I know that there are so many specialist maritime lawyers who are available both within, the ministry, within the agencies of the ministry as well, that can take the forefront in issues like this. It would be nice if we actually began to see some sort of results other than giving the ministry a fancy name.
Right, that would actually be very, very important. But just before I come back to you, Mr. Sig, we're looking at this particular ministry now. The minister has, should I say, made a couple of steps, initiating the rehabilitation of the Apapa and Tinkan Island ports and so on and so forth. Why is it that, generally speaking, we don't hear about these steps and these things being done out there? Because, like I said, this ministry is hardly ever spoken about. And if they're doing these sort of things right there, shouldn't they be putting it out on the regular that, oh, this has happened, we've done this? Because we see in other ministries, we hear a lot. For example, Ministry of Interior, we're more or less up to date, in quotes, with what's going on there. Shouldn't that be the same thing in this ministry and really in other ministries as well?
Well, it behoves on the stakeholders in these ministries to promote the work that they're doing. This is not the time where you would say, oh, let my actions speak for me. Your actions can't speak for you if you don't see those actions. And the only way we can see those actions is if they promote what it is that they're doing. And I think it's extremely, very, very important. So some of these things that, that the ministry appears to have focused on are sort of like long-term things. we
Right.
may not necessarily see the results now. Which is partly why also, we question what exactly it is that the ministry are doing. But I'm always in favor of addressing both quick wins and long terms. And you must always promote what it is that you're doing,
Right.
ultimately so that we can see these results.
Most definitely. All right, Mr. C, let me come back to you right now. And as we're talking about earlier on, Kyari, the EFCC, what's going down?
Well, I don't think much is going down. So he's been invited by the EFCC to answer questions. I don't know why they needed to make it public information, but let's go with what has happened before. He's been questioned with regards to his tenure at the NNPCL. Also, I believe part of the questions that will be asked is what happened to the refineries that was supposedly undergoing turnaround maintenance, and then what happened to certain sums of money. Now, the truth of the matter is he will provide the information he has, and he can't do more than that. Now, at the end of these interrogations, one of two things will happen. It's either he'll be left alone because from his information, no prima facie case can be raised against him, or at best, they will file criminal charges against him in a court, and then he will have his day in court to defend his name. Now, beyond all of this, there is a systemic problem with Nigeria today and the way it operates, the way it runs. So taking individuals out, interrogating them, preferring charges against them in court will not change that systemic imbalance, that systemic rot. We need to go back to the roots, because think about it. Name a sector of the economy that doesn't have systemic issues. We have the Ajakuta steel plant that has never worked.
Right.
But I want to believe that over the years, individuals have been asked to superintend that project. How many of them have been brought to book? How many of them have been asked questions? Previous presidents, previous heads of states have allocated money to that project, still nothing. So for people who are saying it's about time Kyari is interrogated, yes, nobody should be above the law. That is the ideal. But in Nigeria, interrogations are neither here nor there really at the end of the day. A trial may start, it's going nowhere, nobody understands what's going on. Case in point, a former governor of Kogi State. We all recall what the EFCC chairman said about him after he left office. We all recall the comedy that ensued between the agency and this individual.
Comedy is right.
And believe it or not, in spite of everything that was said individual is in his house enjoying his life. This is Nigeria for you today.
This is Nigeria for us today. But Mr. C, just before we leave this particular story, you made a very interesting point about going back to the roots. How exactly are we going to go back to the roots? Because if you go around, even amongst the average Nigerians, you just wonder, is there any hope of getting ourselves out of this situation that we're in right now?
Well, it's not a quick fix, but we need to start the reorientation process. I want to believe it started, but not on a large scale. We need to go back to the families, because the families are the building block of society. We need to reinstate values that have long since gone or are long disappearing. For example, the concept of hard work is fast disappearing. Today, most teenagers, most young people between the ages of 15 and say 30 want what they term soft life. In every serious country, the people who enjoy soft life are the people who've either inherited it or have put in the work, not people who dabble into criminality. So it's going to be a long process. We may not even see the results in this generation or the next, possibly the third generation, but we have to start that process. Because if you bring in a 30-year-old guy, the system will corrupt him. And there's a saying I came across yesterday: a bad system will always defeat a good man.
Hmm. And the thing is, it's not just the same because if you look around you, wherever it is that you've been, worked, and so on and so forth, you've seen good men who have fallen to the system. The system always finds a way to break them one way or another. That has to change. There's no doubt about that one. I'm talking about systems that are very iffy and very upside down. Before I come into that, Gbubemi, you can join us on WhatsApp as always. Send those messages on 0911-999-0981. All right, back into systems. Let's talk about this from the Daily Trust. We're heading into the world of aviation here, where stakeholders in that sector have described the proposed meeting of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority with the domestic airlines as timely and welcome to address recent issues of flight operations and the growing complaints by passengers. However, the summon is causing disquiet in the industry, with airlines insisting that the major causes of flight disruptions were not within the purview of the airlines. Do you agree with that assertion? I mean, if you've traveled enough within Nigeria, you know that it is probably worse than Russian roulette. Number one, quality of service, delivery, it's just something else. What are your thoughts, baby?
My thinking is that both parties are equally guilty. The airline operators and the airline
Regulators,
authority regulators.
right,
Now, if we take a look at flight delays, what causes flight delays? So on the part of the airlines, there are such things like getting the aircraft ready for the flight. So let's say Lagos to Abuja, the plane that goes from Lagos to Abuja gets to Abuja, they do some light maintenance, refueling, and all of that, and that plane is supposed to come back. Now, if anything that happens along that process, it's going to affect the return time for the next flight.
correct.
That's one cause of delay. Now, sometimes it could be that the issue or whatever is so significant it can't be repaired within the expected amount of time. So they probably need to look for another flight, another plane, or find how to lump passengers together on another flight or whatever. That's another cause of disruption. And there's so many other things, with the airlines. Now, with the regulatory authorities, there are things like flight scheduling, for example. Airline operators have complained about congestion, in terms of the takeoff times and landing times, managing that for all of the airlines. They've also cited things like weather, for example, for which no one has
No control.
any control over. So for me, I think it always boils down to accountability at the end of the day. If the relevant parties are not holding people accountable, we can't see any differences. So even us, the passengers, for example, if my flight is delayed, do I just accept it and just sit down? The instances, I remember I went to Abuja once and I was on an 8 something flight to Lagos. So my flight took off as expected, maybe like 5 minutes delay, and I was here.
8 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I had a friend who was on another airline, that was supposed to have flown before my flight. So maybe his flight was like 7:30. And he told me that his flight didn't take off until about 4 something in the afternoon. So that's about 9 hours after I was
Thereabouts.
exactly. So when things like that happen, what are passengers doing? Many passengers are not even aware that they can seek redress, officially, that the airline, there are guidelines as to how the airline should compensate passengers for these delays. I've heard of instances where flights were even delayed beyond midnight, and those flights will still take off after midnight and then land maybe like an hour later. So I mean, are the passengers supposed to be leaving the airport to go home at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or whatever? There are regulations about how passengers should be treated when such things happen. Booking overnight accommodation, transportation to the accommodation and back to the airport and things like that. So enforcement, has not been as efficient as it should be. The passengers themselves, we the passengers are ourselves also, taking action on these things because many of us are not even aware that these regulations are available.
Right.
For those who are available, many don't even want to push it because you don't want to get into the stress of going back and forth and all of that. And these are the things, this is the kind of habits that ideally we should adopt in every aspect of life. If a service provider commits to a certain standard and the service provider does not meet that standard, then the person receiving the service must be willing to go all the way to ensure that their denial of that service standard is addressed. Many of us just, we're fed up with the system and we don't want to push things.
Could it just be because the methods or the steps that you need to take to get redress have been made so difficult. You ask yourself, is it even worth it at the end of the day?
So it could be that, but ultimately, if people don't even take those steps, we can't even seek the changes to those steps. The more people who take those steps, the more people find out how, all the kind of hoops that they need to jump to be able to, seek redress. The more people who will be arguing for changes and things like that. And I'm not just putting all the blame on us, the passengers, as well, the regulatory authorities as well. What are they even doing with sanctioning the airlines when the airlines are found culpable? How many times have we heard of that happening? Not so many times. And even the regulatory authorities, when they are culpable, how are they sanctioned? How do we bring them to account?
Good question. Thank you for that, Mr. C. You have to come out to answer this.
Yes. So I think so. Like I always say, we're not a serious country, and that's just the gospel truth. The airlines, so the regulators don't seem to know what they're doing. I'm sorry to say this, but where they should come down hard, they look the other way. And it's akin to what we see on our roads when you see LASTMA and traffic policemen looking the other way when the commercial drivers are up to their usual shenanigans. Now, for some of the airline operators, they will schedule 4 or 5 flights, knowing fully well only one is going to actually take off. And then they do have this practice they call merging of flights. So they book it, they advertise at 10:30 and 11:30, 12:30 and 1:30, knowing fully well it's only the 1:30 that is going to take off. There are no sanctions. And then when Gbubemi was saying when a service provider has subscribed to a certain level of quality, with regards to the aviation industry and domestic flights, what is the level of quality they've subscribed to? Have you taken, I would like to invite any of you to take a trip to the Federal High Court Registry, and you see the number of cases that have been filed against airline operators. It's crazy. These guys simply do not care. And that is why they struggle to get approval to fly in foreign countries, because then they can carry on with their usual shenanigans. Well, let's see what will come out of this meeting. Let's hope that they will turn a corner and everyone will start to behave themselves.
Let's see. Let's see if that's going to happen, because, like I said, for those who have had cause to travel on a regular basis, those delays alone, they can cause you quite a bit of grief. All right, Mr. C, let's step into the punch here. Let's talk about what's going on in Lagos State, where the state government has said that it engaged relevant stakeholders in the Oroshoki area of the state before carrying out demolition in the community, adding that the Makoko community would be next for the removal of illegal buildings. Now, if you remember, the residents of the Oroshoki area trooped out on Monday to protest the demolition that rocked their buildings on Saturday, where they lamented their losses of shelter and property. They blocked Third Mainland Bridge, caused traffic, and so on and so forth. Now, these issues of demolitions and so on and so forth, they've happened so very often, and it just calls into question once again. Number one, those who erect the buildings. Number two, those who approve said buildings. I mean, why do we always have a case of buildings have been put up, people have been there for a long time, and then someone wakes up to the reality that, oh, these buildings should not be there. Let us go and demolish. Why is it hardly ever nipped in the bud?
Okay, so let me try and throw some light on this, and some people are going to be upset or offended, but that's fine. So let's start with a legal perspective. You cannot benefit from an illegal act, no matter how long it has taken. So we have people who have presumably built in the wrong places without approval and have been undisturbed for years. Nevertheless, when the law is ready for you, you will have to go because you have no approval to be there. So, for example, people erected structures under high tension lines. For the love of everything good, how does that even make any sense? Because if any of those high tension wires were to fall to the ground, there'll be a massive loss of life. Now, there are a lot of decrepit and ramshackle structures along the Makoko coastline and even towards the end of the Third Mainland Bridge around Oronshoki. Now, the Lagos State government did say that it had issued notice, had been engaging the people for about 3 years. And typical of most Nigerians, they didn't think this day will come or this period would come. And now the Lagos State government has said, you have to go because you cannot be here. Now, for those of them who have valid papers, my advice to them is take them to the Ministry of Physical Planning at Alausa, present your documents, and you will either be compensated or you'll be left alone if your building hasn't been removed. If your building has been demolished in error, you'll be compensated. Now, where am I going with all of this? We have a human social problem here. Yes, you are saying they shouldn't be there, they need to leave. They need to leave to where? Have you shown them the alternative places they can go to restart life? Because we all know that Lagos has a housing deficit problem. It's not going to go it's not going to go away anytime soon. And sadly, most of the commercial developers are focused on the middle income and high income consumers. Very few people, if any, are developing stuff for the low income guys. So the bigger question here is, yes, you can use the instrument of state power, you can remove them from that area. Where are they supposed to go to? And if they decide to constitute a nuisance, how do you deal with that? Because you then have to expend more money containing the nuisance. Yes, I hear the position of the Lagos State government that sometimes some of the miscreants who attack motorists on the 3rd Mainland Bridge run into these shanties. But there's a control room now that oversees security in Lagos State. So the key question for Lagos State government is, where do you want these people to go to? Are you willing to help in some form of manner to aid them to relocate? Because it can't just be get up and leave. That's not going to work long term.
I hear you on that one, Mr. C. Before we wrap it up this morning, still on this matter, how do we get to a point where we don't have instances where these buildings actually get erected in the first place? How do we get to a point where we don't have start talking about, oh, we need to demolish, you need to go? Because the building shouldn't be there ordinarily.
Anyway, I know I've seen some crazy developers. Lagos State government agencies actually show up to sites, mark the buildings, and leave notices for whoever is developing to come to Alausa. These wonderful, unfortunate human beings will continue those structures, complete them, paint them, people will move in.
But between when the notices are given, the seal notices and so on and so forth, between then and when the developers decide, you know what, we're not going to listen, we're going to build, finish, and so on. What happens with the regulatory bodies? Do they just decide, you know what, they didn't listen, let them build, and we'll come back later? How does it work?
So I think the challenge for the Lagos State is they don't have enough bodies or boots on the ground, because this indiscipline I'm talking about is going on simultaneously all across the state. So assuming Lagos State says, okay, today we're rolling out to demolish illegal structures, do you know how many caterpillars or bulldozers they would need to do it concurrently? And I think they're also trying to put a human face to it that, okay, look, come, let us see how we can resolve it. If your building absolutely has to go, it has to go. If we can modify it, you can alter some parts, it will be altered. But I think the developers too need to change, they need to start behaving themselves. But these people who are shouting and screaming, you can't blackmail government or manipulate government or gaslight government. If they need that space, they need it. Now, let's not be surprised that when they get these guys out, we start getting ocean villas overlooking the lagoon.
Ocean villas, the sea view. Goodness gracious. All right, let me run through the messages here. This is from Joseph Meunier. Good morning, my ever vibrant presenter Ayo and Gbubemi and Mr. C. It's just pathetic how majority of the regulators operate in Nigeria, from power, telecom, food and drugs. Imagine issues that happened in recent times between airlines and passengers. How are the matters resolved? The regulator was biased because of personalities involved, from the senator to the ordinary passenger. All right. And this is Gilbert Musa in Festac, who says, on the recent drilling of the former NNPC boss, like Mr. C said, we need to get to the root cause of this continuous corruption cases. The question is, what aids public officers to misappropriate money? Can't these loose avenues be blocked or fenced off? That is a good question. Well, I think one thing that actually gives them the impetus is greed. There are a whole lot of greedy people out here in Nigeria. Greed is a very, very serious problem. People that want to eat with all their 10 fingers and 10 toes. And it should not be that way. It's a huge problem. And let me see if I have any comments here on YouTube before we wrap it up. All right. Thank you all so very much for the messages. Any final words, Mr. C, as we wrap it up on the show?
Well, let's close out the week in style and let's look forward to the weekend.
All right, Gbubemi.
Yeah, same here. We're the only ones that can save the country. Let's find out what we can do as individuals.
Let's see what we can do as individuals. Every little bit actually counts. It comes together. Thank you so much for being a part of Freshly Pressed this morning. It's been brought to you right here on Smooth 98.1. All right, let me sneak this one in very quickly. It came in last minute. This is an Aguero message for those who understand. If you know, you know. Jerry says, the Nigerian system is not unique from others. The lack of strong institutions is responsible for the corruption and shenanigans. Who is supervising these buildings that the foundations are casting are done at night? Your question, well, your guess is as good as mine, Jerry, but we need to go. Thank you so very much for the message. It's been a pleasure. Keep it tuned to the Smooth Breakfast 8:15. It's all about entertainment, gist, and all the good stuff in the grapevine.